My nephew asked if he could stay in my guest room while he got back on his feet. 3 weeks later, I found a strange pill bottle hidden in my medicine cabinet with my name on it, but I'd never been prescribed those medications. Instead of confronting him, I started taking notes and pretending to be confused. Then one morning, he made a phone call he didn't know I could hear. "Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button." Now let me tell you how a retired judge from Connecticut outsmarted a con man who thought dementia was his secret weapon. My name is Margaret Sullivan, though everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 66 years old, and I spent 32 years on the bench in Hartford Superior Court before retiring 3 years ago. My husband Robert passed away 14 months ago from pancreatic cancer. And if you've ever watched someone you love fade away over 6 months, you know it changes something fundamental inside you. Robert was a corporate attorney, methodical and careful in everything he did. He organized our finances like he was preparing for a Supreme Court audit. Every investment documented, every account labeled, every password stored in a fireproof safe in our home office. By the time he died, we had accumulated roughly $6 million in assets, not counting the house in Westport that his parents had left us. The thing about being a wealthy widow is that people start paying attention to you in ways they never did before. Some of that attention is genuine concern from friends and family. Some of it, as I was about to learn, is something far more sinister. Kevin first appeared at Robert's memorial service. I was standing by the refreshment table, accepting condolences from colleagues I hadn't seen in years, when a young man approached me with tears in his eyes. He introduced himself as Kevin Marshall, Robert's nephew from his brother Daniel's side of the family. Daniel had been estranged from Robert for decades, something about a business deal gone wrong in the 80s. They hadn't spoken in over 20 years. Kevin explained that his father, Daniel, had passed away 2 years earlier, and he'd only recently learned about Robert through old family photographs and documents. He'd tracked down the memorial service through the obituary and wanted to pay his respects to the uncle he'd never known. I should have been suspicious. 32 years of listening to defendants spin elaborate stories should have made me immune to manipulation. But grief has a way of lowering your defenses, and Kevin was good, really good. He had Robert's eyes, or at least I convinced myself he did. He asked thoughtful questions about Robert's life, seemed genuinely interested in family history, and never once mentioned money or inheritance. Over the following months, Kevin became a regular presence in my life. He called every Sunday, visited for dinner twice a month, and remembered my birthday with a beautiful orchid that he knew was my favorite flower. He told me about his struggles, a failed marriage, a business that went under during the pandemic, mounting debts from trying to do the right thing. Never asked for money directly, just shared his troubles the way family does. When he mentioned that he was about to be evicted from his apartment, I offered him my guest room. "Just until you get back on your feet," I said. That was 3 months ago. Here's what I didn't know then, but learned later. Kevin Marshall wasn't Robert's nephew. Kevin Marshall wasn't even his real name. And the troubled young man who'd cried at my husband's memorial service was actually a professional predator who'd been targeting elderly widows for over a decade. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in March. I have a routine that hasn't changed much since retirement. Wake up at 6, coffee and news until 7, then a 3-mile walk around the neighborhood before breakfast. That morning, I logged into my email to check a message from my financial advisor and noticed something odd in my account settings. Under recent activity, there was a login from a device I didn't recognize, an iPhone, logged in at 2:14 in the morning, 3 days earlier. I don't own an iPhone. I'm an Android woman, always have been. Robert used to tease me about it, said I was the only judge in Connecticut who refused to join the Apple cult. I stared at that login notification for a long time, my coffee growing cold on the desk beside me. Kevin had an iPhone. I'd seen him scrolling through it constantly, always texting someone, always checking notifications. But why would Kevin be logging into my email at 2 in the morning? The rational part of my brain, the part that had spent 3 decades evaluating evidence, suggested there might be an innocent explanation. Maybe my account had been hacked. Maybe it was a glitch in the system. Maybe I should just change my password and forget about it. But another part of my brain, the part that had watched countless victims testify about the moment they realized something was terribly wrong, told me to pay attention. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I said nothing to Kevin, changed my password, and started watching more carefully. The second sign came a week later. I take medication for high blood pressure, have for years. Same prescription, same pharmacy, same little white pills I've been swallowing every morning since I was 52. That Thursday, I opened my medicine cabinet to grab my daily dose and noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was a second bottle behind my regular prescription, same pharmacy label, same medication name, but the pills inside were different, slightly larger, slightly yellower, with a different texture when I rolled them between my fingers. I'm not a pharmacist, but I've presided over enough drug cases to know that pills should look consistent. I've also watched enough true crime documentaries to know that one common way to incapacitate elderly victims is to substitute their medications with something that causes confusion, memory loss, or cognitive decline. Was I being paranoid? Possibly. But paranoia had kept me alive through 32 years of death threats from defendants who didn't appreciate my sentencing decisions. I decided to trust my instincts. I took both bottles to a pharmacist friend from my book club. "Eleanor," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, "I think the pharmacy might have made a mistake with my prescription. Can you check if these are the same medication?" Eleanor examined both bottles with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent 40 years behind a pharmacy counter. "Maggie," she said slowly, "these are definitely not the same pills. Your regular prescription is lisinopril. But these," she held up the suspicious bottle, "these are something else entirely. I'd need to send them to a lab to be certain, but if I had to guess, I'd say these are designed to cause cognitive symptoms, confusion, memory lapses, difficulty concentrating. Someone is trying to make me think I'm losing my mind," I said. Eleanor looked at me with the kind of concern that comes from decades of friendship. "Maggie, do you have any idea who would do something like this?" I had a very good idea, but I wasn't ready to share it yet. Instead of confronting Kevin, I developed a plan. Call it professional curiosity or call it survival instinct, but I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I made my next move. I've seen too many cases where victims acted prematurely and gave their abusers time to destroy evidence or flee. Step 1 was documentation. I photographed both pill bottles, saved screenshots of the suspicious email login, and started keeping a detailed journal of Kevin's behavior. Every question he asked about my finances, every time he mentioned my will or estate planning, every subtle suggestion that I might be becoming forgetful. And there were suggestions. Plenty of them. "Aunt Maggie, didn't you already tell me that story yesterday? You seem tired lately. Maybe you should let me handle the grocery shopping. Have you thought about giving me power of attorney, just in case something happens?" Step 2 was intelligence gathering. I contacted a private investigator named Diana Cross, who came highly recommended by a former colleague from the DA's office. Diana specialized in elder fraud cases, and when I described my situation, she didn't seem surprised at all. "Mrs. Sullivan," she said during our first meeting, "what you're describing is textbook elder exploitation. The ingratiation phase, the isolation from other family members, the manufactured dependency. Have you noticed Kevin discouraging you from spending time with friends or other relatives?" Now that she mentioned it, I had noticed. Subtle things, mostly. Concerns about my old friends being too demanding of my energy, suggestions that family gatherings might be too stressful for me, offers to screen my phone calls so I wouldn't be bothered by telemarketers, which somehow resulted in fewer calls from the people I actually wanted to talk to. "I'll run a complete background check," Diana said. "If this Kevin Marshall has done this before, there will be a trail." Step 3 was the hardest part, acting normal while I gathered evidence. For 3 weeks, I played the role of a slightly confused elderly woman who was growing increasingly dependent on her helpful nephew. I asked Kevin the same questions multiple times, pretended to forget where I'd put my glasses, and let him take over more of my daily tasks, all while documenting everything and waiting for Diana's report. The report arrived on a Friday afternoon, and it confirmed my worst fears. Kevin Marshall did not exist before 3 years ago, No birth certificate, no school records, no employment history. The social security number he'd been using belonged to a man who died in 1987 at the age of 4. His real name, Diana discovered through fingerprint analysis from a glass he'd left in my kitchen, was Marcus Webb, and he had a criminal record stretching back 15 years. "Mrs. Sullivan," Diana said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This man has been convicted twice for elder fraud, once in Florida and once in Arizona. He served 18 months for the Florida case and got probation for Arizona. His M.O. is always the same. He identifies wealthy widows, manufactures a family connection, moves into their homes, and then systematically takes control of their finances while simultaneously undermining their cognitive confidence." How many victims? That we know of? 7 confirmed. But based on his timeline, there could be many more who never reported. Many elderly victims are too embarrassed to come forward, or they've been convinced by the perpetrator that they're actually losing their minds. What happened to the other women? Diana hesitated. 3 lost their entire savings. 1 lost her home. 2 are currently in memory care facilities, though their families now suspect the cognitive decline was artificially induced. And 1, Diana paused. 1 died under suspicious circumstances 6 months after Marcus moved into her home. I sat with that information for a long time after Diana left. The charming young man sleeping in my guest room, the one who brought me flowers and called me Aunt Maggie, was a predator who had destroyed at least 7 lives and possibly contributed to 1 death. And I was supposed to be victim number 8. But here's the thing about being a judge for 32 years. You develop a certain perspective on justice. You learn that the legal system, while imperfect, is designed to hold people accountable for their actions. And you learn that sometimes, if you want justice done right, you need to build the case yourself before handing it over to the authorities. I called Detective Maria Santos at the Westport Police Department, someone I'd worked with during my years on the bench. "Maria," I said, "I need your help with something, but I need you to trust me on the timing." "Judge Sullivan," Maria said, using my old title with the respect of a longtime colleague. "What's going on?" I explained the situation as concisely as I could. The fake nephew, the switched pills, the background check, the 7 previous victims. Maria listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she let out a low whistle. "We can arrest him right now on the medication tampering alone. That's assault with intent to cause bodily harm." "I know. But I want more. I want to connect him to his previous victims. I want to find where he's hidden the money he's stolen. And I want to make sure he never does this to another widow again. Give me 1 week." "Judge, that's asking me to let a dangerous criminal continue living in your home. I've handled dangerous criminals for 3 decades. I can handle Marcus Webb for 1 more week. Besides," I smiled grimly, "he thinks I'm a confused old lady who can barely remember what day it is. That's a significant tactical advantage." The next 7 days were the most exhausting performance of my life. Every morning, I shuffled around my kitchen, looking slightly bewildered, while Marcus, wearing his Kevin mask, solicitously helped me find things I'd deliberately hidden. Every evening, I sat through dinner conversations where he probed for information about my bank accounts, my financial advisor, my estate planning. And every night, after he went to bed, I worked. Diana had connected me with families of Marcus's previous victims, and their stories were heartbreaking. One woman in Tampa had lost $300,000 before her daughter discovered what was happening. Another in Scottsdale had signed over power of attorney during a period of artificially induced confusion and lost control of her entire estate. The woman who died had been Marcus's victim for 8 months before she fell down the stairs. The family always suspected it wasn't an accident, but there was never enough evidence to prove murder. I wasn't going to let Marcus add me to that list, and I was determined to help the other families finally get some measure of justice. By Thursday, I had assembled a case file that would have made any prosecutor weep with joy. Bank records showing transfers from victims' accounts to offshore entities connected to Marcus. Audio recordings of our dinner conversations where he asked detailed questions about my finances. Video footage from hidden cameras I'd installed in my own home, capturing him searching through my office drawers at 3 a.m. The suspicious pills, analyzed by the state crime lab and confirmed to be a medication known to cause cognitive impairment. And testimony from 6 families, ready and willing to travel to Connecticut to see the man who destroyed their loved ones finally face justice. Friday morning, I made breakfast for Marcus one last time. Scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh squeezed orange juice. His favorites, or at least the favorites he'd mentioned during his performance as Kevin. "Aunt Maggie," he said, watching me shuffle around the kitchen with my practiced, confused expression. "You're spoiling me." I smiled at him the way I'd smiled at countless defendants before delivering their sentences. "You've been so helpful these past few months. I wanted to do something special." He grinned, the charming smile that had probably worked on 7 other women before me. "You know, I've been thinking, maybe we should talk to your lawyer about updating your estate documents, just to make sure everything is in order, in case I develop dementia and need someone to manage my affairs." His smile faltered just slightly. "I mean, it's just responsible planning." "Speaking of planning," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee, "I have a surprise for you this morning." "A surprise?" "I've invited some friends over. People I think you should meet." The doorbell rang at exactly 9 o'clock. Marcus's face, when Detective Santos walked in with 2 uniformed officers, was something I'll treasure for the rest of my life. The confusion, the dawning horror, the moment when he realized his careful performance had been utterly useless. "Marcus Webb," Detective Santos said, "you're under arrest for assault, fraud, identity theft, and a host of other charges that I'll be happy to read to you at the station." Marcus turned to me, his charming mask completely shattered. "You knew. This whole time, you knew." "I spent 32 years listening to people lie from the witness stand," I said, dropping my confused elderly woman act entirely. "Did you really think you could fool me with a fake prescription and some carefully placed concern?" He lunged toward me then, his face twisted with rage, but the officers were faster. They had him in handcuffs before he could take 2 steps. "You can't prove anything," he snarled as they led him away. "It's your word against mine, and you're just a confused old lady." "Actually," I called after him, "I have about 40 hours of video footage, sworn testimony from 6 previous victims, your fingerprints on the contaminated medication bottle, and bank records linking you to $500,000 in theft across 4 states. But please, tell the jury about the confused old lady. I'm sure they'll find it very compelling." The trial took place 8 months later in Hartford. Marcus's lawyer tried everything. He claimed I had entrapped his client. He argued that the video evidence was inadmissible. He suggested that I was a bitter widow who had falsely accused an innocent young man who was only trying to help. The jury didn't buy any of it. What they did buy was the testimony of Marcus's previous victims, elderly women who traveled from Florida, Arizona, Nevada, and California to face the man who had stolen not just their money, but their confidence, their independence, and their peace of mind. One by one, they told their stories, the flattery, the manufactured intimacy, the gradual isolation, and finally the systematic theft of everything they'd worked their entire lives to build. I testified too, of course, not as a victim, though I had been targeted, but as a witness who had seen through the performance and spent 3 weeks building the case that would finally hold Marcus Webb accountable. His lawyer made one final desperate attempt during cross-examination. "Mrs. Sullivan, isn't it true that you're a former judge with extensive knowledge of the legal system? That you essentially ran your own investigation and built your own case before contacting police?" "That's correct." "And isn't it possible that your investigation was biased, that you decided my client was guilty before you had all the evidence?" I looked at Marcus, sitting at the defendant's table, no longer charming, no longer sympathetic, just a middle-aged man in an ill-fitting suit who had spent 15 years preying on lonely widows. "Counselor," I said calmly, "I spent 32 years on the bench. I've seen innocent people falsely accused, and I've seen guilty people walk free because the evidence wasn't strong enough. I know the difference. Your client is not innocent. He targeted me because he thought I was vulnerable. He drugged me because he wanted me confused. And when I proved that I was neither vulnerable nor confused, he tried to run. That's not the behavior of an innocent man." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found Marcus Webb guilty on all 23 counts, including charges related to his previous victims that we'd been able to document during my investigation. Judge Harrison sentenced him to 35 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 20 years. The restitution order required him to repay every dollar he'd stolen from every victim, plus interest. As the bailiffs led him away, Marcus looked at me one last time. I could see him trying to understand how a confused old lady had destroyed his entire criminal enterprise. The answer was simple. I was never confused, and I was never just a lady. I was Margaret Sullivan, former Superior Court judge, and I had dealt with predators far more dangerous than him for 3 decades. Marcus Webb had made the mistake of thinking my age made me weak. Instead, my age had given me experience, patience, and the determination to see justice done. 6 months after the trial, I used part of the recovered funds to establish the Sullivan Center for Elder Protection. We provide education, legal resources, and support for seniors who've been targeted by financial predators. My daughter runs the day-to-day operations since she inherited her father's talent for organization, and we've already helped dozens of families recognize the warning signs before it's too late. I'm 67 now, still living in the same house in Westport, still taking my 3-mile walks every morning, still sharp enough to spot a con artist from across a crowded memorial service. And every time someone underestimates me because of my age, I smile and remember Marcus Webb's face when the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Some lessons, after all, are worth learning the hard way. Just ask the man who thought he could outsmart a retired judge with a bottle of fake pills and a charming smile. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.